Hello and welcome to our discussion of Unit 4, beginning with Chapter 9 here in Corporate Finance. This chapter is talking about the first of the three different sections that I mentioned this course covers very thoroughly. And this one is capital budgeting type decisions. Capital budgeting is about what long-term projects should the firm undertake. And included with what we've already discussed in Chapter 3 as to net present value, internal rate of return, we also have to look at the specific cash flows to understand the quality of the cash flows and the assumptions that we're making. Assumptions need to be listed in looking at any project. Here in Chapter 9, page 276 or 275 in your book, maybe section 9.1, we're going to look at some of the important accounting terms that have to be considered, and you're going to hear in discussions. And if you don't know the definitions, you'll get confused by what other finance or accounting people are talking about. So I want to make sure that we're clear. First thing to understand is that we are only looking at relevant cash flows. And as we see in the left margin of the text, we see this relevant cash flow is described by incremental cash flows, the difference between a firm's future cash flow with a project and cash flows positive or negative without the project. And then the shaded box, the incremental cash flows for project evaluation consist of any and all changes in the firm's future cash flows that are a direct consequence if we took the project. So those are things that we look at these cash flows, we ignore the others. Only what changes with the project is if it is taken. So we're going to put relevant. If you're having a discussion and somebody says that some assumption you're making, well, that's not a relevant cash flow. It may not be that it's not important. It's not important because it would not change if you didn't take on this project. The second concept that's included in this is the standalone principle. The standalone principle right below that on the page is an assumption that the evaluation of a project may be based only on this project's incremental cash flows. Other things may be affected. We'll consider some possible changes, but only things which are involved in this particular project, as though this was the only one we're doing. There may be other projects that are also being started or before or after this one. Those are ignored. This project is considered, will it generate cash flows that will contribute to shareholder value on its own? And that's what we're seeing here at the bottom of this page. The next term is the term sunk cost. Sunk costs are costs that have already been incurred, capital expenses, or training expenses, or something that was used for a different project, or for maybe general costs in the firm. Maybe this project will benefit from some of them, but they are not included in our estimates of costs because they are not affected by us taking this project. This is a standalone project. It is not a relevant cash flow. So we may have equipment already, not included here. And we see that in the margin definition. A sunk cost is one that has already been incurred and cannot be recouped, and therefore should not be considered in an investment decision. The next one is opportunity cost. Opportunity costs, as it's defined there on the side, is looking at, if we didn't spend the money for this project, this hypothetical potential project, it would be spent on something else. There's other options. It's not going to sit in the bank. It's going to be spent on something. Because we're not spending it on this other thing, the alternative, we're spending on this. So what revenues or expenses are going to be foregone because we're not using the alternative? So the opportunity cost is about usually benefits. In other words, it's used the word cost, whereas this is actual expense. And since cost, well, that would be an additional expense, money out. It could be the cost, in this case, of opportunity. It could be a positive thing. We have the cost of benefits or profits, which we are not going to be able to add to the bottom line because we're using the cash instead for this project, if we do that. On page 278, the term side effects. Side effects, and these could be positive or negative. Sometimes a project has spillover effects. There might be some, we may increase sales for this new project, whatever product we're coming up with, but that may be at the expense. We may be cannibalizing sales for another company product. I don't care if I take away from a competitor, but I want to take away from my own product line, and so there may be some side effects